You know, every time I look at the great cathedrals of Europe, I feel something strange, a quiet whisper, as if the stones themselves are asking a question we were never meant to hear. Because if the people of that time could not have physically built these structures, then the real question becomes painfully simple. Who did? And oddly enough, the answer isn't hidden in ancient manuscripts, but in something far less forgiving: mathematics. Let's begin in Reims, France. There stands a structure so majestic, so impossibly intricate, you almost hesitate to call it construction. It feels more like composition, a symphony in stone, frozen mid-crescendo. The official story claims construction began in 1211. And somehow, this part always makes me smile. We're told it was completed in just 80 years. 80. So picture this: a world without electricity, without cranes, without trucks, without computers. A world where the only sources of power were horses, and the rhythm of hammer and chisel. Now ask yourself, could you build something like this in 80 years? Or even 200? We are told medieval people wrote with quills, lived in cold huts, fought with swords, and lit their nights by candlelight. Yet somehow, in that same reality, they produced structures that challenge modern engineers. Funny, isn't it? These buildings, cathedrals, castles, fortresses, stand across Europe like silent accusations, as if the past is staring back at us, asking why we believe stories that fall apart the moment we breathe on them. Let's set aside admiration and look at something far more mundane: logistics. Millions of tons of stone had to be quarried somewhere, transported somehow, shaped with precision. That would be difficult even today. Where were the quarries? Where were the workshops? Where are the records of the thousands of workers who would have needed food, shelter, clothing? Historical chronicles are silent on all of this, painfully silent, suspiciously silent. We're asked to believe that a civilization without industrial tools created logistical chains as complex as modern construction operations. And somehow, no one wrote anything down. It's almost comical how often "don't worry" becomes a historical explanation. But there's another pattern, one that appears so frequently it becomes impossible to ignore. Before the Grand Cathedral, there is always a fire. Always. A wooden church mysteriously burns, conveniently, right before a stone masterpiece appears on the same spot. Isn't that a little too neat? This fire story accomplishes several things. It wipes the slate clean, it justifies sudden construction, and it links an inexplicable masterpiece to a primitive wooden predecessor that conveniently no longer exists. It's a narrative band-aid, a template reused again and again to cover the gaps in the official timeline. But the story gets stranger. Every masterpiece needs an architect, or so the textbooks insist. Take Jean d'Orbe, for example, the so-called architect of Reims Cathedral. Except when you look for him, there's nothing. No school, no students, no blueprints, no calculations, not even a reliable biography. He appears in historical records only where it's convenient, as if someone needed a name, any name, to attach to an ancient structure they couldn't explain. Even stranger, he is credited with works centuries apart, as if the same man appears and disappears across time like a ghost with a drafting table, and he's not alone. History is full of these architects who exist in name only, as if their sole purpose is to give credit to structures that may have been built long before their supposed lifetimes. Piece by piece, the foundation of the official story starts to crack. Up to this point, you could still argue coincidence, bad records, lost documents, but mathematics doesn't care about excuses. Let's examine population data. The official numbers, publicly available: 1,886, 928 million, 1,817, 314 million, 1,748, 106 million, 1,610, 11.8 million. Go further back to the 1200s, the era of cathedral construction. According to official data, the entire population of Earth was roughly 18,700 people. 18,000 on the whole planet. At the exact time, cathedrals supposedly soared into the sky. Go back to the year 600 AD, and the numbers collapse into absurdity. Three people on Earth. Not as a metaphor, not as exaggeration, just arithmetic. So we're left with two choices. Option 1, humanity magically appeared in the 7th century, and everything before that, Rome, Greece, Egypt, is fiction. Absurd. Which leaves only one alternative. Option 2, the timeline itself is broken. Something happened. Something colossal. A global event that erased most of humanity and reset the world. A great reset. The population numbers don't lie. They simply fail when they try to look beyond the horizon of a cataclysm. If such a global event occurred, say, near the symbolic year 1776, everything finally makes sense. The sudden explosion of population in the 19th and 20th centuries wasn't growth. It was repopulation. The magnificent cathedrals and castles weren't medieval miracles. They were the surviving fragments of a civilization that existed before the reset. A civilization with advanced mathematics, architecture, symbolism, and technology we no longer possess. The people of the 1800s, the ones we see in early photographs, weren't builders. They were inheritors, posing beside structures older than they understood. Across continents, we find identical symbols, identical architectural codes, identical building signatures, echoes of a single global culture later fragmented and rewritten. These were not the works of scattered medieval tribes. They were links in a chain, the remnants of something unified, something advanced, something lost. The buildings remain. Ancient, majestic, often half-buried. Their stones whisper a truth that history books refuse to speak. They tell us that our civilization is not the first, that our timeline is not continuous, that we are living in the aftermath of something great and terrible. A story rewritten. A world rediscovered by survivors who had no idea what came before them. The numbers don't lie. The photos don't lie. The structures don't lie. They were always here, waiting for someone to pay attention. And this is only the beginning. If you want to follow this trail, the symbols, the ruins, the mathematics, the forgotten world beneath our own, then stay here, because things are about to get much more interesting.